Yes, can you see this screen?
Yes.
Right. I'm going to talk about introduction to chemical weed control. Now, when we are talking about chemical weed control, normally we refer to herbicides. So, what is an herbicide? It is a chemical used to control weeds. Yeah, this is the basic definition. And in most cases, we may have what are known as selective herbicides. These can kill weeds, leaving the crop unharmed. For example, atrazine in maize. Then we also have some which are non-selective herbicides. These can kill both crops and weeds they come into contact with. For example, use of glyphosate. Now, herbicides usually are sold in containers with labels, which which give the direction of how you are going to use these chemicals. So these are some of the examples of herbicides. You may find that herbicides are mostly used in the US and probably Southern America, Brazil. They consume quite a lot. India and some Asian countries, Russia and Europe, then Australia. But in Africa, herbicides could be mostly used in South Africa and large scale commercial farms. But we have got a large percentage of smallholder farmers, especially in Africa, who are not using these herbicides. Now, the use of this technology probably was used in 1896. The products then were copper sulfate, which were sprayed on broadleaf weeds in cereals. And they tended to kill, copper sulfate tended to kill broadleaves, leaving wheat. In 1912, there was an attempt to use sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid can kill everything, but diluted sulfuric acid could probably kill some weeds. The real herbicides, as we know them, were developed in 1944. This is when we had 2,4-D, which was widely used as the herbicide for weed control in wheat. Then in the 1950s, there were more developments. We got introduction of trials in herbicides, for example, atrazine, which is still in use today. Then there was a 2,4-D introduction in Zimbabwe around the 1950s. Now, in 1965, the wheat research team at Henderson Research Station was established just to deal with weed research, especially evaluation of herbicides. By 1974, herbicides such as glyphosate had been introduced, and we know glyphosate is non-selective. So basically, this is a bit of the history of the herbicide technology. If you look at it, it's fairly recent. Real herbicides were initiated in 1944, which is not far away. Now, normally herbicides, we use knapsack sprayers. This is an example of application of pre-emergence herbicides. Spraying pre-emergence herbicides using a tractor boom sprayer. Now, what are the advantages of using herbicide technology? When we were doing the critical period for weed control in crops, one of the technologies to use to eliminate early crop weed competition in order to increase crop yields could be the use of herbicides, because they can ensure timing or timely weed control as opposed to hand hoeing, which can be inefficient and consume a lot of labor. So with the use of herbicides, number two, there could be the reduction of time spent in weeding. Another advantage is that labor could be released to do other jobs. Uh, this technology can remove what are known as labor bottlenecks, which occur from November to January. During this period, there's competition for labor for planting and also for weeding early planted crops. Now, use of herbicides could actually make it possible to increase the area where where crops are planted. Now, under wet conditions, it may be very difficult to use hand hoes and mechanical methods. So, this technology can actually be used under wet conditions, which means it's quite an advantage compared to mechanical methods. Now, with herbicide technology, it is possible to allow reduced tillage or conservation farming, which is currently known as Pfumvudza. It can actually be implemented easily because weeds could be problematic under conservation agriculture. So use of herbicides could increase crop yields through timely planting. The other advantage is that, herbicides could improve the quality of life in smallholder farming areas. If you note that women may spend 75% of their time hoe weeding, especially during peak weeding periods from December to February, as was reported by Chivinge in 1990. So Herbicides could allow people to, to do other things. Now, they are very difficult to control weeds such as cyanodondactylon and Cyperus esculentus. We can deploy herbicides to control these weeds, especially if we use things like glyphosate. However, there are also disadvantages associated with the herbicide technology. One of the big disadvantages is the toxicity of these chemicals. So these are toxic substances. Normally, we indicate the levels of toxicity using LD50. LD50 is the amount of poison which kills half the organisms in a randomly chosen batch of named species, for example, rats, and it is measured in milligrams of poison per kg body weight. So, one of the most toxic herbicides is paraquat with a purple triangle, followed by 2,4-D red triangle, 300 milligrams per kg body weight. MCPA 700, which has got amber triangle. Then glyphosate has got 4,320, which is a green triangle. So toxicity is a disadvantage. Actually, one needs a protective clothing to use these chemicals. So herbicides are poisonous. For example, acetaclo, you can have this sign which indicates that it's a dangerous poison. The other problem with herbicides is when we apply soil when we use soil applied herbicides, they may end up in drinking water, depending on the rate of which they are decomposed. This has also something to do with their solubility in water. Some are easily soluble in water and can easily be leached, especially under sandy soils. We have got an example of the herbicide known as dicamba or banvel, which is easily leached. It can reach the water table if it is applied. So pollution can be a problem, or residual problems with herbicides can interfere with crop rotations. The other disadvantage is that depending on the nozzles which you are using, you may end up transporting large quantities of water for spraying. And the clean water for spraying may not be available in the farming areas. Now, I've said in my introduction that in Africa we have got a large proportion of smallholder farmers who are not using herbicides. I think it is also the same in Zimbabwe. So we may want to address this question: why herbicides are not used widely by smallholder smallholder farmers in Zimbabwe. Well, in 1984, Chivinge carried out a survey and found that 1.5% of the farmers were using herbicides. Probably because of time, because this survey was done a long time ago, there could be some changes. Because there has been this land reform program, probably we now have some farmers in the newly resettled areas which have moved from the former communal areas, and probably they have adopted the use of herbicides because of large hectareages. But probably this figure could be still the same in typical communal areas. Now, what could be the problem with the herbicide technology under smallholder farming conditions? According to Chivinge, there was a lack of awareness, and probably this could also have changed. Farmers could be aware of this technology. But according to this survey, about 99% of the farmers were not aware of herbicide technology. The other problem is that a few extension staff has been carrying out herbicide demonstrations. That could be a problem. The other issue could be sprayer calibration, which could be challenging. The farmers may not know what dosages to use. And because herbicides can actually kill crops, so some farmers may be hesitant to use it, to use the technology, because it can involve a lot of volume measurements and doing some calculations. Making mistakes could be very costly. And most of the instructions, in fact, they are in English, and it may be difficult to comprehend. The other problem is cash. It's not easily available because it is required to purchase these chemicals. So there's limited cash to purchase inputs at the right time. Farmers, sometimes farmers who sell their maize to GMB are sometimes not paid in cash. Sometimes farmers grow crops at a loss, for example, cotton and tobacco. Now, we are told that farmers now are reluctant to sell their maize because they anticipate that they are going to be paid money which is not corresponding to what they spent growing that crop. Now, if you try to buy herbicides, you may find that in some cases, some outlets just want US dollars. If they don't take US dollars, they inflate the prices. So it becomes problematic to acquire these herbicides. They become very expensive sometimes, especially in this environment in which we are operating. Third, there are no credit facilities. Banks are not financing cropping budgets in most cases uh, for smallholder farmers because they lack a collateral or a movable property. Even the farmers who are in the resettled farms, banks are not using a land as collateral so that the farmer has access to credit. The other issue is something to do with rainfall and climate change. Farmers consider herbicide technology to be risky, especially during a drought period. Probably, if we look at the type of season which we had recently, there could be some farmers who could have used the herbicides, but the yields they obtained because of drought may not pay for the inputs. So frequent droughts and unreliable rainfall leading to frequent crop failures maybe, it may cause farmers not to purchase herbicides because they may consider them to be risky. There could be also poor infrastructure and support systems. No regular and reliable supply of agricultural inputs. Farmers who reside in smallholder farming areas may have to travel, to cities in order to purchase these products because they may not be found at growth points where they normally purchase other inputs. Sprayers and insecticides can be found in some of the local shops, with the exception of herbicides. If they are there, probably you get a limited, range. So there's no choice for these farmers. When it comes to packaging, now sometimes herbicides are sold in large packs. For example, 5 liters. The farmer may not want the 5 liters. Probably they want 2 liters, 3 liters, or 1 liter. Or some packages are even beyond 5 liters. So packaging can discourage, because the capital or the cost which is involved could be very high. In fact, during this environment, the cost of chemicals are quite prohibitive. Not only herbicides, even insecticides. So this is the herbicide packaging. Maybe the farmers may need these small packages, but sometimes you only find these 5 liter containers, not 1 liter or 2 liters. Now, at some point, there were some demonstrations on herbicides which were conducted in Chiota, Narira, and Chorocho. So there were some issues which were raised by farmers during herbicide demonstrations and the trials. Probably we may have a look at some of the issues which were raised by farmers. Now, Some farmers were not very clear on the timing of herbicide application. For example, some wanted to weed first, then they come in and spray. Some were worried about the dry conditions. Some of them were doing a dry planting. Now, in the case of a pre-emergence herbicide failing to control weeds, in case it rains, some farmers uh, wanted to know whether one could repeat in the same field, in the same season, and also between seasons. No, this has something to do with the residual problems. Some were concerned about the amount of herbicide applied per hectare. This comes to calibration. They were also worried about the herbicide, in fact, the herbicide residual effects. For example, if you put the herbicide, is it going to stay there for a long time? Would it be possible to grow crops afterwards? Something like that. Now, use of herbicide in intercropping systems and rotations, these were issues raised. On the technical issues, there was this toxicity versus the efficacy. Some farmers thought probably the most toxic herbicide was the most efficacious one. Now, sometimes farmers experience poor germination because of moisture problems, yet the herbicide could have been applied. So they wanted to know whether replanting, where herbicides have been applied, could cause problems. They also wanted to know the range of herbicide formulations, because when it comes to measurements or measuring the quantities they want, the formulations become important. Then the managerial issues which were related to extension messages. The language is basically, most of the language is it's highly technical, and it's on the labels. Sometimes we talk of spray rates and other technical issues which farmers may not understand. They can only use the herbicides probably in the presence of an extension personnel. Then, of course, availability of herbicides. When they need them, they don't find them in shops, in the local shops, sorry. There was also the issue related to costs, which was, they wanted to know which was expensive, traditional weed control methods or cost of the herbicide, cost of knapsack sprayers, all these issues were being raised by some farmers. On environmental issues, farmers were also concerned about contamination of food by herbicides. For example, if you apply the herbicide, won't it affect the crop? I mean, won't it affect humans after eating the either the maize or the beans? Now, effect on animals which eat stover, they were worried about their livestock. If you treat, if you grow maize applying herbicides, what will happen to their livestock if they eat the stover? Things like that. So you may find that farmers may be worried about a whole range of things before they can adapt or adopt the herbicide. But otherwise, the herbicides could reduce a lot of labor. Probably we may need to talk a bit. Otherwise, I will stop here.